I get you. Look, George, you have two girls. You're in a different world. You're in a la la land. Like your walls are painted pink. George Panusi is like all masculinity. And you know what? We have both. I see both. And when one is dominant, I get a little uncomfortable. And when the other one is dominant, I get a little comfortable.
Yeah.
These things exist. It's not a social construct. Yeah. These things exist. Their energies are different. I just wanted to say that because it's very important.
And welcome to another episode of Just Us Dads. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Dadversation. We are breaking the rules today. We must say we have a topic that we needed real professionals to come on, and the only real professionals we know are women. And more than that, our wives. So Chris and George are here as always, and we have Chris's wife, Alexandra.
Chris's lovely wife, Alexandra. Chris's lovely wife.
Our fans.
Thank you.
We might lose fans for this, Alex. I hope you know that. But
well, I'm very honored that you're taking this chance on me. Very honored to be the first female on your podcast. Very ironic that I'm here to talk about toxic masculinity.
Yeah, that's the big topic, and the truth is that we've been pushing this back, pushing. We didn't know how to approach the topic, and we thought, maybe we should have someone that deals with this on a regular basis. We're gonna talk a little bit about what you do and how you're exposed to toxic masculinity, or how, I'm not sure if you teach it. I'm not sure exactly how it works. We're gonna talk all about that. But just to say one thing, because we have had people commenting that we should have a female version of this. The idea is out there. Whoever wants to do it, it won't be happening here.
Nukes, he hates it. He almost left the podcast now.
But I don't have a problem time to time bringing on one of our wives, and to have like the other side, right? But whatever, that is being discussed.
George is starting a separate podcast. That content is not coming.
Is George producing and mommies are...
whatever, but it's a new show and he's going to add that logo on that shirt pretty soon.
Trying to more space on George for the logos.
He's going to put it on the shoulder. There's space here, George.
So yeah, welcome, Alex.
Thank you.
First of all, how are you? First, I don't even know how you guys are doing this right now because nobody's watching the kids. So at any point in time, there could be disaster on this podcast. We're not sure. And George also is he's home with the kids. It's one of the rare times we're recording during the day. So Cynthia's not home. So George is with the kids, and you guys are both on the podcast. So nobody's watching those kids. This is the only safe environment right where I am, because it's the only place where nobody's going to come interrupt.
I think both in our house and in George's house, we're relying on our trusty babysitter television. Is that it?
Cool.
Oh yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Actually, I think number one babysitter is the iPad, because I can go for hours and they don't ask for extra pay. It's the iPad. Then I think, and then it's the TV. But these are the two best babysitters out there, and they're free.
Yeah.
Or $8 a month, and you're good.
Almost free.
It's almost free. Yeah, it is.
Almost free.
All right, we're going to talk about something that, like we said, we've been discussing for a number of weeks, maybe months, toxic masculinity. I had no clue about toxic masculinity. I heard about this maybe a couple of years ago, and I was like, what the hell is this? I don't know if it's a sign that the times are changing, where we're looking at every single thing with the slightest little detail. But this is serious, though, toxic masculinity. It's not just it's just not some, a flavor of the month kind of trend. So we're going to go through all of that, and because Chris knows a lot more about this, and obviously Alex deals with it. So let's talk about toxic masculinity, people.
Well, before we talk about the toxic masculinity, it's important, I think, to define the terms.
Yeah.
Because we may agree or not agree on certain terms, and is this really an adjective that is suitable to put after masculinity? So toxic is venomous, it's poisonous. Masculinity, obviously, it's the manliness. It's the masculine trait of men, right? I know there's a lot of redundant information there, but that's what it means. What is it to be a man? Well, there's certain attributes, characteristics that make a man a man. So if we call these attributes poisonous. Well, the idea is like, are we causing a service or a disservice to boys and men? Because boys will end up becoming men. So men, like men.
Ma'am.
So it is one of these funny topics, and it's one of these topics for me. When I first heard about it, it kind of offended me, and I'm not into this whole culture of being offended with everything. I don't get offended with anything, but it offended me in the way of like, why are we talking about this way? And then I heard what the solutions were, and the solutions that I find is what is bad. So I can let Alex a little bit talk about toxic masculinity. I just wanted to make sure that we understand what the words mean. So we're trying to debate or discuss today poisonous masculine traits, and the idea, like just to set the stage a little bit for this, where the discussion is going to go, is the solution getting rid of these things or having to deal with them? Because I don't think anybody's going to say no, these traits don't exist. Obviously, George has 2 boys. I have a boy. George, you have 2 girls, so you probably don't see this a lot, or maybe you see it in your nephews or in other kids. But what happens is you can kind of see aggressivity, you can see dominance, you can see certain masculine traits that manifest in the home and in different situations. But that's fine. So the idea is, do we deal with these or do we try to eradicate them? Mm-hmm. I'm in the opinion that we have to deal with this stuff, not eradicate it.
Yeah. Well,
right?
Well, first, let's start defining what toxic masculinity is. And for those who are interested, Chris did write a blog about that. So that's on our website, justasdads.ca. You can go there and read it. Maybe Alex can help us out. What do we mean when we talk about toxic masculinity?
Okay, so basically, I hadn't heard the term either until Chris mentioned it, and I thought it was such a ridiculous term to put those 2 words together. But then it started popping up more and more and more and more, and it comes from 2 very different places. So it started becoming super popular when the American Psychological Association started dealing with it, and they used the term in order to help boys and men that were dealing with societal pressures that were causing them to have a lot of negative effects. So when an association like the American Psychological Association is dealing with it, it's serious stuff, and it's done by professionals. So it's like, when your doctor tells you don't Google your symptoms because you're going to end up, freaking out over what you find and all that. Well, I find it something like that. When it's left to the professionals and they're dealing with it case to case, like a boy that is dealing with certain issues, it's okay, it's fine. I don't have an issue with it. Let the professionals deal with problems that kids are having or men are having, because we'll get into it later, but they're serious issues. My problem is when toxic masculinity is hijacked by activists and third wave feminists and people that don't really know what it's about. And then it is kind of a flavor of the month. George, you mentioned, is it really? It kind of is. And with the times that we're having right now with the Me Too movement, and I'm not, criticizing any of these things, I'm just saying it was the right timing for this term to be hijacked and to be taken out of context. And when people hear it, it's so intense, toxic, and then masculinity. So when you just listen to the term, you think, oh, well, being male or having certain male characteristics could be toxic. And that's where I have an issue with it, because instead of looking into it, what does it really mean? And what are people actually dealing with? We're just thinking, oh, well, male characteristics are toxic and then we should eradicate them because they could be. I don't know if what I just said made sense.
Yeah. They're saying to eliminate the whole thing, to avoid the bad, the
to avoid certain bad behaviors, because if there are certain societal norms to being a traditional man or a traditional boy, right, that we're trying to change now and in our last decade. But those sometimes on a certain individual do cause a lot of stress. Like if a boy is not super boyish or not super jock, he's not tough or stuff like that, if he feels those pressures and it causes him to get, to close in and to feel weak and to feel that's bad and that needs to be addressed. But like I said before, it needs to be addressed by professionals, not just by, oh, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. All boys, because you are a little bit more of an introvert and you're a little bit closer to your feelings. All boys should be like that. All boys should talk about their feelings all the times. And that's how they should deal with their frustration. Well, that doesn't really make sense, because that's not going to help them. I mean, George, I'm sure, if your kids are having a tough day, I don't think they're going to really want to sit down and talk about their feelings that much. It's just not something they tend to gravitate towards. It's something that needs to be taught. Does it need to be taught, though? I don't know. So, do boys really need to deal with a situation the same way maybe a girl would need to deal with a situation?
Because the flip side is that these characteristics, these behaviors can lead to a dangerous path down the line if they're not really addressed. But are we generalizing in assuming that, well, okay, this little boy is a little too aggressive, he might become whatever, you know what I mean? He might be a danger to society, or
yeah, that's exactly the problem. That's exactly it. When you see certain characteristics that have been labeled as toxic male, toxic masculinity traits, then the second you see it in a little boy, you want to, pound it out of him. Well, maybe not pound, because that would be more toxic masculinity. But you just want to take it. You want to take it away and give him something else instead of saying, well, yeah, that's something that it's innate. He deals with his frustrations like that. It comes from within, and we need to harness that. We need to guide him into using it somewhere else, because the same characteristics that could become extremely negative down the line are also characteristics that could become positive down the line if dealt with appropriately. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's removing them. I think it's, like Chris was saying at the beginning, dealing with them and showing them a way to be.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that, because I get the feeling that this is something that came from, I do believe it's from third wave feminists. I do believe it's from misandrous people, like man hating. There's a man hating ethos behind this. And I'm not trying to balance the scale, but you don't hear in mainstream media discourse, you don't hear toxic femininity. And all I'm saying is that you have female traits and attributes, and you have male traits and attributes and characteristics. And just to make maybe a bad analogy, it's almost like a weapon. Women have certain arsenal they can use. Men have certain tools they can use. It's almost like take a scissor, right? A scissor is kindly made to cut paper, but it can be used as a weapon. The idea is how to learn how to channel and understand when to use what. And what Alex is saying is you need those traits that you label as toxic. You need these for other situations. Obviously, extreme situations, maybe like war, jumping into a fire. A fireman goes in when everybody's coming out. You need that courage. That's a trait that we need to keep and protect, or else we're not going to survive, right? We're here at this point today because certain male traits helped us achieve that. So I don't believe we should be condemning them like that. You understand?
Yeah. So what's the argument right now? What's the movement? Are we trying to, like Alex was saying, to kind of eradicate these things, or are we trying to educate?
Let me just finish this, Alex, and this is going to be just a precursor for you to say what you're going to say, Alex. We're against, or I'm against. Now I'll have Alex say what she thinks. The solution. Sorry, guys. My dad was FaceTiming me. That's never happened. Yeah, I had to decline. Oh man, it was such a surprise. I lost my thought. Yeah, what I was trying to say is that I strongly disagree with the solution, which I think the idea, or at least I don't want to say agenda or program, but I think the idea is to try and feminize men. That means we have certain traits in women that kind of work, sensitivity, like awareness, right? There's different. Women have certain traits that are really, really, really good, and we need.
Yeah, but is that a fact, Chris? Is that what's really happening? Are we really trying to make boys more in touch?
This is not. I'm not saying it's a fact. This is, in my opinion, what I see it happening. Yeah. And when there's experts that can deal with certain things, and then there's activists that want to promulgate certain other things.
Yeah.
I'm always a believer of the scientific method. but there's certain things that kind of negate science when your whole purpose is just to be an activist about certain things because you want certain results in the world.
See,
right? So
see, here's what I don't understand about this concept. Are we worried so much about toxic masculinity that we're trying to make kids eliminate these feelings, or because of whatever worry might exist for a potential future, aggressive behavior, are we trying to educate boys on how to use it efficiently? Like the example that you gave with a scissor. Are we trying to eliminate scissors completely, or are we trying to tell them this is for this purpose?
I think it's twofold. I think people that are doing it properly are trying to show them how to use scissors properly.
Right.
And then I think there's the people that are just talking too loud right now that are trying to eliminate scissors altogether because they're too dangerous. I mean, dodgeball has been taken off of a lot of schoolyards because it was too dangerous.
Wow.
Maybe it's good, but maybe, a lot of people have gotten hurt from it. I don't know.
That's
but
fine.
Is that the solution? Getting
Don't
rid of it altogether?
No, man, if you're afraid to get hurt, don't play. I don't understand. Okay.
Yeah, but the reason behind it, look, it hasn't come in our schoolyards yet. And I find that everything that kind of happens in the States trickles over to us a little bit later. So I think we're just, we're looking out for it now, waiting for it to happen. Yeah, eliminating dodgeball from the schoolyard because it's an aggressive sport. Why? Because you're looking to hurt somebody else. You're looking to hit somebody else. So that's why it was completely eliminated. So that's an example of getting rid of the scissors altogether.
Yeah. But you see, I don't see dodgeball
so I think it's both.
But
I don't see dodgeball like that. No, I'll tell you why. Because the point of the game is to get somebody with the ball. You have a target and you go after it. Now, it doesn't mean every time you throw the ball, you want to hurt somebody. Every time you throw the ball, there's a possibility or maybe a probability of hurting someone.
Well, look,
and that's everywhere. Because if we try and create a society where no one gets hurt, there's no harm ever done, all we need to do is create a giant aquarium, live in that little bubble, and then nothing will happen.
Look, Chris,
that's what
it only hurts when you get it in the face. That's
oh yeah,
wear a mask.
But that's what I was going to say. The reality, like the definition, yes, you try to take the ball and you got to get someone out. But let's be honest, when we used to play dodgeball, we wanted to put the ball through the person. It's like, I'm going to destroy you.
But that's fine. Okay, that's fine. That's competitive.
But yeah, that's exactly the reason why you wanted to do that. I never wanted to do that. I didn't even want to play dodgeball. I wanted to play when everybody was playing, but I didn't have that same drive to take the ball and get it through somebody. Yeah. So this is where people jump in and they'll say, well, that's a male characteristic and that's a dangerous characteristic. That's something that later on is going to become dominant and he's going to try to show dominance through aggression and violence. You see, but in reality, if kids play enough dodgeball, that's going to be, ça va se régler là, like it's going to be done there. Like that's where it's going to end.
Guys,
that's what comes to mind.
I have to be honest.
So you're saying let them get their dominant juices out of their system, and
I'm saying there needs to be places where they need to deal with this. Especially boys, they need to deal with it. They need to have their social rank as well. I mean, again, we're talking about a lot of stuff that seemed to be so obvious decades ago, and right now they're super controversial. What we're saying, having boys try to see where they rank is not an appropriate conversation to be having. But it's something that happens so naturally on the schoolyard.
But now that you mentioned like the decades ago kind of thing, is there still that movement that existed probably like before this term came to be, where kids are still pushed? Like, for example, you're not allowed to cry. You got to be tough. You're the man. Like, because that's pretty much how this whole movement started, right? There was this social pressure of having to be like this, and people realize that, look, certain kids aren't like that. Like, you can't just be tough all the time, or you can't be the fastest, you can't be the strongest, you can't just hold back your tears or hold back your emotions because you're a man or a kid. Is that still happening?
Well, that is why the American Psychological Association took that term. That is why they're dealing with this. They set out guidelines on how to deal with kids that are having those issues.
Right.
So they're doing a good job. I mean, there's a lot of societal pressure on boys and on girls too. They're just different. And because they acknowledge the fact that they aren't going to deal with them the same way. And because they're not dealing with the same societal pressures, that's why they came out with those guidelines. So they're doing a good job on working on a one-to-one basis, on a case-per-case study for kids that are dealing with these kind of feelings, like the ones you just mentioned, George.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of negative effects when a boy or a man wants to be traditionally male, when it's not coming from within, that is an issue. Absolutely. The problem that we're talking about is when it's taken very superficially, very lightly, and we just want to take the scissors away from everybody, instead of dealing with it on a case-to-case basis. That's the problem. So it's twofold.
That's the problem.
So it's two very different things.
So how does it work?
So one side is you have to stop pushing kids to be a certain way. And on the other side is let them feel what they feel naturally and guide them through it.
Not necessarily.
That's what you're trying to say.
No. What she's saying is that let them do what they have to do, but at the same time, kind of educate them on how to
channel it.
Take it to the exactly, how to channel it.
Well, I'll give you my 2 cents.
Group people all together. Like the other thing is, like, don't just put everybody together. They're boys and they all act like that, and they're girls and they all act like that. And you can't just put everybody in the same big mass. Everybody's different. I mean, there are certain things that come out more in boys. And
wow, there's a concept. There's a concept, guys. Everyone's different.
But in reality, people deal with their issues in a different way. Then again, when that being said, I do believe that there are certain differences between boys and girls. And the fact that then there's that other group that comes in and says, no, there are no differences. It's all societally imposed. They're all societal norms. And then we got to eradicate anything that society has said over the course of time in order to have this equal, peaceful society. That doesn't work either. Because when we try to make boys more like girls, we're going to end up building frustrations that weren't even there before. We're going to end up having more frustration.
So how does it work on in a professional or like institutional setting? Like you're a teacher. So how does it work in this kind of setting? Are you guys as teachers being trained to deal with this? Are you looking into it? Are you doing it presently? Like, what's happening?
Look, I think that it's very different from what the states are dealing with. We're not at the place where where they're at right now. And I think even Ontario is different from us. I think Quebec is a different beast. I think we're more conservative in Quebec. I think we're more, I don't want to say behind, but we have more old-fashioned traditional values now in schools, but it is changing. So, I mean, we're trying to, there's a lot of general neutral talk, that comes along, and you have to deal with kids as if they were the same. I'm going to talk personally about myself. I'm not there. I can't deal with an issue with a girl the same way I would deal with it if it's a boy. I just don't see it that same way. If a boy pushes, maybe this is really bad what I'm going to say, but if a boy pushes a boy in the schoolyard and then they both get up and whatever happens, I'm not going to deal with it the same way if a girl pushes a girl in the schoolyard. I mean, a lot more had to happen for that girl to push another girl. You know what I'm saying? Right. If a boy pushes a boy, sometimes it's like, okay, get up. You want to talk about this? You want to deal with this, or do you want to keep playing? And they'll both just turn around and say, we're going to keep playing. It's okay, fine, bye. They don't want to, like, it's done. It is what it is. It happened. We do it all the time. Like, they look forward to doing it. They look forward to going outside and pushing each other. Right. It's not.
I just want to say something, Alex, here, because you're bringing into the light, I think, more of an overlaying problem, which is the obsession. I want to write a blog on this too. The obsession with equality and equity. I think today we are obsessed with equality and equity. We just want one simple formula to deal with everything. And that is just what Alex said. You cannot deal with every problem the same way. Not every problem is created equally. Not all people are equal. We should treat them equally, but they're not equal. They're not equal. There's certain strengths and certain weaknesses. There's different characteristics, whether it's female, whether it's dominance, whether it's because of physiology, right? There's a big boy and there's a small boy. You cannot, not everything is equal. And this obsession of trying to make everything equal is where we lose the game, because we cannot formulate really good solutions when the thinking is wrong, right? The thinking is wrong.
Right.
Well, you said something important. You said we're going to treat them equally, but we're not going to deal with them the same way. Like, consequences are going to be equal. You're not going to favor one, whatever. They're both going to get consequences.
They have the same rights, is what I was trying to say.
They have absolutely the same rights.
It's the same, but you cannot, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say, but they're not.
We're not going to deal with the situation the same way.
So is this Alex? And I don't want to. I don't think what I'm about to say is going to put you in any trouble or anything like that. But is just having a conversation here. Is this something that is being discussed in your school? Have you guys had meetings like how to deal with toxic masculinity?
No, not yet. We're not there. We're not there yet. And I think that people that do deal with kids on a daily basis, and have dealt with, look, there's in schools, it's mostly females, right? Boys at a young age are constantly around women. And Chris had said something last time. He had told me, well, would it have been different if there were more male teachers? Would boys have been dealt with differently if there were male teachers? Maybe they would have been dealt with differently. I don't think because I'm just going to go back, because one of the negative effects of toxic masculinity is the fact that boys have more academic challenges. They get in trouble more. They're more rowdy than girls. They're going to get punished more than girls are. And, it's negative for them because they get in trouble more. And it's also negative because they're disrupting the class more, let's say. So again, it's twofold. Then there's going to be the people that are going to want to deal with it, like why are we attacking boys so much? And then there's the people that are going to say, well, boys are causing trouble in class, so we want to change that about them to cause less trouble. So you see, again, it's like we're talking about two playing fields. So would it have been different if there were more men teachers? I don't think that kids would have gotten in trouble less if there were more men teachers. I think maybe they would have even gotten in trouble more if there were more male teachers, because men have a little bit less patience for these kind of things. Women just tend to be more nurturing at the younger ages. Sorry, again, I'm stepping on controversial terms here, but I think they would have gotten in trouble more if there were men being teachers. Would they have been in a better place? I think what boys need are more male role models. I do believe that. I think it would have been a better place if there were more male role models, good male role models.
And earlier on.
So I think that's why you guys as dads have this super, super important role to play when it comes to young boys, because they look to you to see how to harness their aggressivity, how to harness those, competitive feelings. They're going to look onto their role models to see how to use it. It's not going to be me. If my son is not going to look to me to see how his inner competitive is going to be used, he's going to look onto another male because that's who he identifies with. Yeah. So that's why it's super important. So they probably would still be in as much trouble. They just would have been dealt with differently. And is it unfair to young boys to be in a social construct? Because, school is like this mini society. It's like your first mini society. And it's completely ruled by women. How fair is that?
Well, that's how I see it. I see it as that's the first mini society, which comes into conflict with the male biology. It comes into conflict. And it's fine. There's ways to deal with it.
It's also important to deal with it at a young age because they're going to hit a wall. Like, you can't push that person. You can't do that. You can't, they're going to learn that. They're going to learn that they can't do it. They're going to learn where they can do certain things. So I think it's important that they learn that early on. And I think it's important that we don't expect them not to do it, that we teach them where and how and and at what intensity to do it.
Yeah. And and the whole idea, this is where I think the rubber meets the road. And I heard this from Prager University, and I'm gonna misquote it a bit, or I'm gonna try to paraphrase. But the idea was that let's say we want to fix men, right? Well, what we really want to do is we want to fix bad men. So men don't become bad when they're less men. Men become less bad when they're less bad. So you understand? We don't want to take the manliness or the boyhood out of the boy or the male. What we want to do is we want to correct the bad behavior. And that's a total different planet.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are seeing the nuance between that. It's a whole different planet of attacking a problem. You don't want to get rid of men. Obviously, there's toxic masculinity is a bad trait. Well, no, let me rephrase that. Males have certain toxic elements in them, but that's fine. They come. You take the good with the bad, you take the bad with the good. There's obviously more men in prison. There's obviously more men that commit homicide. There's obviously more men as soldiers and in a war. There's obviously more men that are homeless, right? But the good, let's not forget the good. You got to take the good with the bad. You're right. You could and generalizations are very important as well, right? Because a generalization is how we need to communicate. So we need to see what the general idea is and say, okay, like there's a little bit more aggressivity here. They like competitiveness. Let's keep that. That's a general idea. And then we have to deal with the exceptions differently. You can isolate an exception, and an exception doesn't invalidate the generalization or the rule. It's just, it needs to be treated differently.
Yeah. You know,
did that make sense?
Yeah, it did. It did.
Of course.
You know, the interesting thing, and you know what I like.
Solution for the whole species doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well,
you can't think of it like that. That's crazy. That's what I'm trying to say. That, and it's like the activists are just loud, and the scientists are not just as loud because they come in form of guidelines and in writings, right? But in the media, you hear what's loud. You don't have the time to read. I've read on this a lot, right? And Alex has read on this a lot. But it takes time to read.
Yeah. But
it takes very little time to listen. So what you'll do is you're going to listen to a headline. You're going to process the idea. You have already kind of a pre-filter that knows what to do with the information, and say, oh, you made up your mind on this.
It builds a bias.
That's right.
I just want to touch a little bit on what Alex was saying about how important it is for, well, especially in not in my setting because I have girls, but in any case, in any parent's setting.
No, for yours as well, because girls need to see good men being modeled as well.
Yeah,
that's right.
You come,
very important as well.
You come straight to my point, and we've spoken about this in other podcasts on how important it is to be the best version of yourself, because you're a reflection of what your kids are seeing every single day. So you want them to use you as an example of how they want to be in society. But I'd be very curious to know if there's any stats or any studies conducted on kids, for example, boys who had gone through this process. And how that is playing out now with their own kids, if that matters, or
which process, becoming less manly?
Yeah, exactly.
The demasculinization.
Oh man, that scares me. That scares me, guys.
So you mean? But look, I don't know if there's studies done on that, because it's something that, I mean.
Because I would assume that the argument is, listen, these traits, these behaviors are dangerous for society. We need to educate you. We need to, whatever it is, depending on the setting that you're in, either eliminate them or make you channel the right emotions through these feelings or whatever. But the argument in my mind is that we need to make you a better person in societies. And I'm thinking now, if that kid becomes a father, he's going to become that example to his possibly son or daughter, whatever. Let's say he has a son. All right. I'm just curious to know if whatever, process he went through, whatever teachings he went through, whatever school he went through, where they tried to, suppress these emotions because of whatever toxic masculinity definition they were dealing with, if that had any real impact on his kids or the way that he is transmitting these things to his children.
Alex, I'll let you answer, but I just want to say something, because this is where I think the word is wrong. When you try to suppress the emotion or the feeling is where you lose it. That's where you lose the game. The idea is you want to manage it, right? A mother who just gave birth to her cubs, right? A mother dog, a female dog, right? Is very nurturing, but it could turn in a split second vicious if you try to go near. That means we're dealing with two traits now, right? There's the nurturing and the viciousness. And these are very far apart. You need both, because if you manage those and know when to use them, now you create positivity, right? But you do not want to eliminate the viciousness, because then the cubs are at risk and they're vulnerable.
See,
so it's not about suppressing. It's not about suppressing. Suppressing is doing it in a way where it's violent and it's going to create more resistance.
Yeah,
right. When you suppress, you build more pressure. The idea is how to manage it.
Yeah, let me say it more simpler. Has there ever been a father, and maybe not you, Alex, because you're saying that you haven't really seen it, but the question that I have is, has there ever been a father that's gone up to a teacher or to any professional and said, my son, he's a little aggressive, he's a little too boyish, he's a little this and that. Can you guys do something maybe so that we can try to control the situation, like that kind of thing?
I've never, no. A father has never told me my boy is too boy. Can we try to contain it? No.
that'd be
I
crazy.
don't know. No, listen. I'm sure there are people that I'm sure there are kids that are overly aggressive, but usually that's learned as well. Where did they learn to be overly aggressive? So it's not going to be. Chances are they learned it from their dad, and
but it's not crazy, because if we're talking about something that has existed for a couple decades now, like whatever, late 80s, early 90s, is it not very possible to fall on a dad who was potential or probably very aggressive, or he had these behaviors when he was younger, and he ended up somewhere where they told him, look, you got to eliminate this, you got to show more emotion, don't worry, like, you know what I mean? Like, he went through that, and now he's at that stage where he's like, I went through this, maybe this is how we have to teach my kid now. Like, there's like a chain reaction effect to this, no?
No, I don't.
If you say that, George, if you say it like that, we're kind of we're kind of assuming that it's successful. We're like assuming that if you do that, you will achieve that, what they're trying to look for. I personally don't think that it's very possible, because people would really have to get into the psyche and say, you know what, everything you're feeling, like if you take as a premise an aggressive boy and then try to get all that out of him, and then you end up with this very passive and complacent male. I don't know if that's it's a successful experiment. I don't know if it has been. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it has been. I don't know. I don't think that it could happen like that.
Look, there is studies on that.
I don't think that it could happen.
There's one correlation that has been made, and the correlation is the following. The more you try to control the masculine traits, the more people drop off from school. And that's why today you have a lot more women in colleges and universities. Okay, men give up faster. They give up faster.
But why do they give up faster? But that's like, it's like coming to George's point.
Because it's more controlled.
Yeah, so they remove themselves from the situation where they're being controlled.
That's right.
Oh, we succeeded, we got rid of the...
Exactly. It's not a success story. It's more suppression doesn't fix the problem. More suppression creates other problems elsewhere.
And you're saying there's a study for this, like basically.
Yeah, there's thousands of studies. So it's just that these come in conflict with different ideas. And now it's if you break it down to its bare bones, this is a war of ideology. So there's this notion right now from the feminists that called the patriarchy, which is the white man from the West has suppressed everything. And you can see it as, well, you can see it as that. There is some elements of that, right? There is a little bit of the patriarchy, the dominance, the power, right? The strive for power and the greed for power. But that same hierarchy has other elements in it, like competence, performance, that we tend to ignore. So we cannot just go attack the bad. We got to take the whole thing, right? That's why I said you don't get much of toxic femininity. And I will never call that. I'm just trying to make a point. Femininity at the worst range is still not toxic. It's part of being feminine. And I want that in a woman. You can't get rid of that. Mm-hmm. Right?
Basically, what you were saying, just so that everyone can understand, is that there are studies that have been conducted that have demonstrated that when a child is put in that context where we're trying to kind of educate or suppress or whatever, eventually, instead of them getting the result they wanted, it's the inverse that happens, and it's the kid that rejects that environment.
Well, first of all, yeah, look, the data on that is scanty for now. This is a new experiment. Yeah. Old experiments show that if you leave a little boy and a little girl to their choices, one is going to gravitate to something a little bit more boyish, and the girl's going to gravitate to something a little bit more girly. Is there exceptions? Obviously, that's why it's called the bell curve. Mm-hmm. And then you have a lot of the data concentrated in the middle, and that's why we generalize, because you cannot have an intelligent conversation if you just talk exceptions. Right. Because everything's an exception to every rule. So we generalize. So we have studies like that. And we also have studies that boys aren't doing too good in an academic setting. They need to move more. They need more competitiveness, right? They need to be out there. They learn a little bit differently. So right now you have a lot of women in academia and less men, right? And little boys fail more, little boys get suspended more. So yeah, there is studies, and then there's there's a lot of correlations, right? You can read the studies and see what is happening, but are we solving the problem? And is it a problem that we need to solve?
Well,
and if we need to solve it, how do we solve it without creating more problems? Because
so what you're saying is basically the design of the whole education system is less adaptable for boys.
It could be. There's a lot of people. There's Ken Robinson. There's a lot of guys.
So maybe what you're saying is maybe we should change the educational system rather than try to change boys.
Well, it is reforming a little bit, and it's not only reforming for boys; it's reforming for different types of intelligence as well.
Which is good.
Because the school system kind of like the epicenter of the school system is academic intelligence, which is reading, writing, arithmetic, right? There's more intelligence. There's creative intelligence. There's kinesthetic intelligence. There's artistic intelligence, whether your kid loves to play music or whatever, right? So
abilities too.
Yeah, there's other abilities and there's other competencies.
Multitasking.
Yeah, and the ring is kind of growing, which is a good thing. I'm just saying that I totally disagree with the way some of these activists or people are trying to solve certain problems. And you want to solve a problem the right way. And in the pursuit to solving that problem, which is a noble cause, don't take away truths. Don't start eradicating truth. Don't murder things like truths and facts, like biological traits. Like there's other scientists. You know what I mean? It's not just activists.
Now, are they trying to change laws or?
Well, they're trying to. Well, look, this is conflicting. This is very controversial, like Alex said before. There's a lot of different theories here, but it's dogmatic. Science is not dogmatic. Science is science, and every scientist wants the other scientist to challenge him. It's like, here, I did a study. Here, you challenge this. Yeah. Prove me wrong. That's the whole point of it. But when we get to the point where we belittle science or denigrate it, because we want the solution more than the fact, right? We want to ignore the fact just to get to a solution that we want. That's when it gets a little bit dangerous.
No, but when you're saying solution, like, is it a law? Is it what is it? A school
There's no
program?
law. Well, yeah. And you know what? You're going to start seeing things. Alex is going to start. But you know what? We don't see it yet. It's not in our faces because exactly what Alex said. Quebec is a little bit behind. And I don't mean behind in mentality. I think they're ahead.
Less so-called progressive.
Yeah. Being progressive doesn't mean you're improving. You're making progress or improving, right? So they're in the. That's right. It doesn't always mean that. So we're not really seeing this. But like you said, it's going to trickle down. You're going to get to the point where you're like, what are we doing?
But I think we live in these Western societies, and people forget how tough life really can be when you're not. And if you don't have these traits, you're gonna starve, die. You're gonna be the victim of somebody else who is.
Yeah.
And this is why we're forgetting. And we have to. Our societies are not strong enough to think that we're gonna last like this forever. If we give these things up, someone's gonna walk in and take it from us.
Man, you know what? We've been talking for 45 minutes, and you just brilliantly concluded, like in a few words. That's what it is. That's what you need. Don't get rid of that, because you might need it one day.
But let me ask you.
There's people that hate us want to cross the ocean and take it away from us.
Let me ask you another question. Maybe Alex will be able to answer this as well, because I read somewhere that kids are much more under medication right now than our generation. Is this
adults too?
No, but we're talking about specifically for kids here. But is this one reason where instead of looking at fixing or addressing an issue, we resort much more easily to medicate kids? Like, you have a kid that's super excited and is bouncing around all the time, and they're stuffing him with Ritalin, you know?
That's another 45-minute conversation right there.
Yeah.
Because like the topic of medication and taking that route for your child is so complicated, and it's so different for every family, and the levels are like, I'm telling you, it's another 45-minute conversation.
But it's the question I'm asking is, at what, like, is there a relation between whatever they think of
Possibly, because it's not necessarily the toxic masculinity that's going to come into play here. It's the fact, the educational system, how it's built, right? So kids are still asked to be sitting on a desk for X amount of hours. I mean, so teachers are obviously changing that. They see that it doesn't work for everybody, but it's still the traditional form. There's one teacher talking in front of a classroom. You're asked to sit, listen, and do, which is not necessarily like a child that's a little bit more hyper, like you said, more excited. It's probably not the best way for him or her to learn. Does it tend to be more boys? It does tend to be more boys. If the educational system was made a little bit different, would they maybe not have as many kids on medication? Probably. But
can I add something to that?
It's not a concrete answer. I can't say that it's because of this that people are putting their children on medication, because the parents that are dealing with this, they have to think about it long time, and it's just too complicated to say that would be one of the reasons.
I just want to add something to that, because it's a good point, George. I think kids are over medicated, and that there's plenty of research for that. That there's no issue with that. The issue is, and the way to think about it is, why are they over medicated? So what are we trying to achieve? And you want to achieve two things from a parent's perspective. And you want to achieve what? You want to find or trying to create the best environment, right? That is conducive to learning. So you want the brain, right? Let's say we take an ADHD kid, right? The parent's perspective is just doesn't really care if he's a little rowdy at school, or he doesn't listen, or he disrupts, which is a problem. I'm not saying it's not a problem, but that's secondary. The primary focus is, how do I get my kid to learn more, absorb more? You know what? Do I medicate him or not? Am I able to get the information in without medicating him, or can I get the information in if I medicate him?
And it's not just about learning. It's not just about learning.
It's about just absorbing all the right information in order to be a better being and fit in society better.
In his mini society, yeah.
In his mini society. There's the other perspective, though, and I think this is why parents over-medicate children. Parents don't over-medicate children for parents. I think, this is my opinion, I haven't read anything on this. I think parents over-medicate children more because they get more diagnoses from experts. And the reason experts want more medication is because they want to keep a good environment for the rest of the kids as well. So when you have 3 kids that need to be medicated in a class of 20, when you medicate the 3 kids, it's almost a win-win, because they'll learn better, they'll learn faster, and they're going to interrupt less. They're going to be less disruptive, so the rest of the kids can learn more. So it's almost a win-win situation, but it's very situational. Meaning that what are you doing? All you're doing is you're getting a good result for the mini society, right? So we don't know if it's the best way to do it. There's other people, there's advocates of like no medicine at all. Forget the medicine, let them run. You know what? Don't sit down, like Alex said. Education today is still an industrialized idea, right? One board, one teacher, and people in a row, like a factory. Well, kids don't learn as much today, and especially in a very high evolving and very, very ADD world, right? I used to be able to watch an hour and a half or 2 hours of something. I avoid that now. I'm looking for 15 minutes. I'm looking for 150-minute clips rather than sit there and invest my time into something that takes 3 hours. And kids are the same way.
Alex, hold on a second. Is there anything being done like to kind of change a little bit the way the classrooms function? Are there efforts in maybe even trying different techniques or?
Oh yeah, for sure. And different schools work on it differently, and every teacher works on it differently, and everybody's taking note of this, and everybody's realizing the kids are learning in different ways. So everybody has their own methods. I don't think it's like, the new reform that was done when I was in school, when I was in university, was all about that, making it child-centered, right? So the child is the one who dictate the children, their interests dictate what the curriculum will be. You work around them and all that. Is it implemented everywhere? Probably not. Are they trying? Yes, but it's still one teacher and 25 kids. You know what I mean? It's just so much you can do when you're one adult with 25 kids. That's why people tend to go back to the traditional ways of learning, where you have to be quiet, you have to listen to me, and I have to talk, because it's still one teacher with 25 kids. It's still very hard when they're young to have them learning like that independently and having centers. But there's a lot of people doing a lot of great things in that domain. And like Chris was saying, it's mostly the kids are being overly medicated. Maybe they're being overly medicated because of the reasons that you were saying. Maybe it's because more of them need to be. Maybe because their brains are changing because of their exposure to this fast-paced life from a very, very young age. So it's a whole other topic.
I've even heard of parents who decide to medicate their kids without anybody suggesting it because they're just too tired to be parents. They work too much.
Yeah.
It's just the
So it's more a societal issue than a child issue.
That's why I asked. When you mentioned kids, I also mentioned parents as well. Everybody's medicated, so it worked for me. Let me try it on him.
And it is a debate. And again, I'm trying to make it a little bit more philosophical, but it's all about the debates. If you have an honest debate where you bring to the front or the forefront truth, right, and data and empirical data, that's fine. But when you're kind of encouraged by dogma, the result is different. And this
we go back to the initial point that we were saying before. Sorry, I totally interrupted you, but you're used to that.
That's fine. Baby, do it. I kind of like it. It turns me on. Okay.
So basically we go back to the same thing that we were saying before. So it's the dogma, the problem. It's not dealing with the problems. Because there's a lot of the traits that they talk about in toxic masculinity. A lot of them could be detrimental to both society and to boys. They absolutely can. And they do need to be dealt with. It's when the term is hijacked and then just dealt with in a very superficial manner that it becomes dangerous. And then when we use terms like when they say that competitiveness and dominance becomes a toxic masculinity trait, that's when it starts becoming dangerous, because we're teaching young girls to be more competitive and we're pushing them to be more dominant. Why? Why? Because they could be positive traits. So if they could be positive for girls, they could definitely be positive for boys as well. And having a boy
it's more like they trust it better in the hands of girls or something.
You know what? I feel like we're trying to correct something by creating the flip side and creating another problem, a new problem. What's the point? Just to give you an example, okay? We, because of the confinement and all that, and we're watching more movies and blah blah blah, and Yerasim was really doesn't like watching movies, so we try to find movies about sports and stuff like that he'll like. And every time we find one about soccer, it's always a girl protagonist. It's always about a girl team. It's always about, the fact that she had to push through and whatever. And it's great. We'll watch it. But what are we trying to say? Why is that no good anymore in a boy? Why is this? There's a little bit of a war on boys. And I'm glad, because look, Maria's going to play soccer too. And we want her to be a little bit competitive if she's whatever, for whatever reason. But I don't want to take it away from Yerasim. I don't want to tell him, don't be competitive. When somebody comes to take the ball, just, sit back and be polite.
You know what it is? It's a dichotomy. And I'll tell you why. And this is what's strange. We take a female attribute, and if we put it into a man and it flourishes in a man, it's a good thing. If we take a female, a masculine attribute like dominance and competitiveness, and we put it into a woman or a girl, and that flourishes, that's good. It's as if we want to steal each other's attributes, because as if they're better in the other sex, in the opposite sex. So we're kind of trying to put everything into one center. Yeah. It's weird. Isn't that a weird concept? A girl being competitive is great. That's amazing. Right? A boy now being more sensitive is great. What you just did is you took two opposing sentiments, right, and want them seeing flourished in the opposite sex, and you call that a result, or a progress. Right. It's very strange. That's very, very strange stuff.
It could be good.
No. What I'm saying, it's good. Just leave it. If a boy's competitive, it's great. If a girl's competitive, great.
Chris is saying teach a girl to be competitive and to remain who she is, and teach a guy to be more sentimental and remain who he is as well.
Exactly. And that's how you make a strong society.
Yeah. Work with your strengths and up your strengths. Deal with your weaknesses, but and don't try to.
Ideas,
introduce new ideas.
Like it's almost like sorry.
It's starting. It's starting. It has begun.
TV's boring all of a sudden.
It's antithetical to want to encourage more competitiveness in girls' soccer, and in the same time, simultaneously,
to remove it.
Call competitiveness toxic masculinity trait in boys. Yeah. That is just it's the beginning of lunacy.
It's nonsense.
It's nonsense.
How can it be good in one instance?
There you go. Because you're seeing it as a patriarchy.
Like Alex said, it's been hijacked by radicals.
Well, there you go. We're back to it. That's why it's politicized. That's why a topic like this can be politicized. If it stayed in science, if it stayed in the realms of the experts, it can't be politicized. Yeah. But if it's a little bit crazy, a little bit on the activist side, a little bit on the dogmatic side, whoa, the politics could take that and say, "Oh, look, we're virtuous. We're doing this, and we're going to save the world because we're virtuous."
Let's wrap it up. Is there anything else we want to talk about or to say?
Let's talk about feminism.
let's not.
You know what I think about that?
Let's stay on for another 3 hours.
That's a 3-hour topic.
Okay. Let's wrap it up. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. This was interesting.
Thank you for having me.
Putting your neck on the line.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
Having the different sex on the podcast.
No, what would have been interesting is if we would have had somebody that was completely, opposed to what we were saying, because unfortunately we all kind of agreed. Maybe we all agreed because it's a sensible thing to do.
Do we even know? Do you guys even know anyone that's
Oh yeah, for sure.
Really? You know?
Yeah. Go take the center. I'm talking about the political spectrum now. Take the center from liberal to leftist. That's the mentality. All that chunk of people, the progressives, it's all in there. You're not going to hear a conservative say my boy's a girl. You're not going to hear a conservative say that my boy should be more like a girl and my girl should be more like my boy. You don't get that. No, you guys don't agree? You guys look perplexed.
No, well, I don't know. I'm asking. Is there anyone out there?
I haven't done my research. So.
Let's say we take a classical liberal.
Well, look, I think you may be also generalizing, but I understand what you're saying. Like
we always have to generalize. We said that's an intelligent conversation, or else we're gonna be lost with the exceptions.
All right, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in. That's it. Again, thank you, Alex, so much. Follow us on all social media platforms. Head on over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel and listen to us on every single audio platform that you get your podcasts on. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Ciao.
Awesome. See you guys. Alex.